Billy's birthday party. I said, oh, could you send me the address? He never sent me the flyer of that place, and I've never been there. And the flyer says it's a fundraiser for for me. And so I called him and he said, you have to take the check. You have to take the money. You have to take it. So I don't want to cry or I won't get through this talk because we have enough to cry about with the CDC and everything else. That's why you've got your beer. I'll be good later. And I'm thinking it's an outdoor venue, and so I'm happy not to have my slides. And so I'm good with just talking, but a scientist is more comfortable with their slides and with their props and their data. But then you all end up like deer in the headlights because you take one look at the words on those slides and the pictures, and I'm comfortable, but nobody else in the room is.
You guys, this is Dr. Judy Makovich from the documentary The Plandemic. She's here in Huntington Beach, California, speaking today. So
and what the CDC says about the masks, because obviously, everything about COVID is a plague of corruption. Everything about COVID is and always was a pandemic, and nothing that's been done. The science supports every word of what I said, and this is why when I did the movie Plandemic, which was supposed to be a promotional video, that 27 minutes that aired May 4th of 2020. Our book Plague of Corruption came out April 14th of 2020, and it was sold out the next day. And a New York Times and Amazon bestseller. So what's important about that is it's the most censored book of all times, and that was the most censored and the most viewed video. I mean, it wasn't a documentary, it wasn't a movie, it wasn't intended to do that. My friend here, Dr. Lori, read the book in the middle of the summer of 2019. And basically said to Mickey Willis, her longtime friend, you have to see this, you have to see this, you have to see this. And everybody's like, I'm busy, that's boring, and if anybody here, I saw a couple of them here and signed a couple of them here, were brave enough to read our first book, Plague, which was heavy science. So what we knew by August 31st, really, of 2014, when that book was in press, what we knew was I first met a hero of mine, Brian Hooker, Dr. Brian Hooker, and of course there was no movie Vaxxed. It was August 31st, Memorial Day weekend, and I'm driving that traffic to go to Studio City. It was one of the first conferences where somebody dare invite me, and I dare go because when I was jailed for 5 days from November 18th to the day before Thanksgiving in 2011 for refusing to cover up the data that basically said these vaccines were injuring people, especially viral vaccines, because you must grow a virus in a host cell. You must grow them in either human cells, animal cells, and these are cell lines that we use in the laboratory, and I've developed my whole life. So one of the problems with the discovery, when we made the discovery of a new family of human disease-causing gamma retrovirus, that's our first book, is called Plague, and it's a subtitle of something like one virologist's intrepid search into the causes of myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is called derogatorily chronic fatigue syndrome, and autism. And these are just crazy women, and they're not sick at all. They're just crazy lazy. So when I thought, it was because the blood supply was contaminated. So in 2009, after almost, let's see, we submitted the paper, interestingly enough, May 4th of 2009, and Plandemic came out, the part one of the promotion came out May 4th, 2020. So in those 11 years, so the paper didn't actually publish in the journal Science until October 8th, 29. In that book, there's a chapter, and so all of our stories go through the facts and how the government covers up things, how discoveries are treated, how the journals, our scientific journals, are little more than propaganda. It's propaganda masquerading as science. And this is what everything about COVID is on overdrive. Because, so I wrote, I called Kent Heckenlively as my co-author, and he's a 6th grade science teacher, and he's an attorney. And the reason why he writes all the books, or at least wrote the first couple of books, is because after I got out of those 5 days in jail without a lawyer, without seeing a judge, without any of my constitutional rights, with no warrant, no crime, no nothing, my house searched, my friend's house searched.
Thumbs up if you can hear me clear, if you can hear Judy speaking clearly. Sorry, my hands are shaky.
Or your family, and that means text, talk, call, do anything. No blogs, no scientific meetings, so it was a virtual gag order. And so Kent has a severely injured daughter.
Ruby, where are you? Come to HB, Old Village Ward, across from Costco in HB.
The XMRVs, the mouse retroviruses that contaminated not only the blood.
It just started. There's no place to sit. I'm standing in the back, but it just started, so come.
You can get blood. And they're doing it again now with COVID, so I'm going to keep trying to bounce back and forth. Oh, the Red Cross gave me sense, said, oh yes, it's just fine to give blood. Well, I keep saying there's a chapter in one of our books about a technology by a company called Cerus, C-E-R-U-S, and that company in Northern California, I've been everywhere I go, I say, hey Siri, you better find out if your technology can decontaminate the blood, because we're in trouble. And so it's not serious, it's Siri. But anyway, and because I know they hear me when I talk on my phone, they hear me. And every time I talk on my phone, and during those 5 years and since, you can hear them taping, you can hear the clicks, you can hear the FBI. And so the other thing I usually do is say, hey FBI, or the attorney generals in Nevada, and it's really very important in the story, if they had done their job, the FBI and the attorney generals, COVID never would have happened. Our courts are failing us, everyone's failing us, and that's an interesting part of the story with meeting Brian Hooker. And the other thing about our books, with Kent Heckenlively writing them, so he said, they can take everything from you, but they can't stop you from writing a book. They can in 2020. They can censor it. It's hard to buy one. It's hard to get one, even me. And can't have to buy my own books, and Amazon won't send them to me. They've censored our book, The Case Against the Mask. They don't censor Plague very much because they think there aren't heroes like you out there who will weed through it and see it. But they and really try to understand it. We wrote that book for the doctors. Because we knew if the doctors saw the science, we knew if the doctors saw the names and the places and the times, that everyone in the world would get it. And that's what happened. So the book was finished on August 31st of 2014. It was literally in press. It came out literally the day I was jailed, November 18, 2014, right at that time when I can talk again. So Kent is a lawyer, so he would call me or email me the night before, so he is my lawyer, and I could talk to him. and he'd tell me the topic that he wanted to talk about tomorrow. And then he'd take he asked me for every name to talk to, every one of the players, everyone who was involved, and see if I was telling the truth lawyer-wise, so he really can interrogate. And then put the history behind it. So it was in press when I met Brian Hooker. So when I was let out of jail, I was literally forced the Monday after Thanksgiving to go to Reno, Nevada, and turn myself in for the crime of stealing the notebooks. And as Kent wrote in that last chapter, while I was in jail, there was a lady who was homeless, and she'd get herself arrested in November because it's cold and wet. So she'd get herself arrested all the time. She knew the police, and she'd spend the weekend in jail, and that was good for her because she was homeless. And she just talk. And we were trying to situate us. They had us shackled to go that last day. We had to go appear before the judge, and they had us shackled hands and feet. And you're like just praying. I'm trying to count the number of women so I don't end up. We called her Crazy Mary in the book, but her name wasn't Mary, and she wasn't crazy. She was smarter than anybody. So she's just chatting up a storm, and you're humiliated. You smell horrible. You've basically been in solitary confinement for 5 days. Those, they try to Epstein you while you're there, get you to sign a confession was what they tried to do, which they called an apology. Sign this and say you made up XMRV, and poof, it all goes away. And I think I said fuck you, so I can do that here because even though we're in church, and we are in church because this is perfectly legal, because we fear only God, and we don't fear big pharma, and as healthcare practitioners, especially MD doctors, the first thing they say is do no harm. Well, I had a great t-shirt. A friend showed me a great t-shirt in Dallas, Texas, where I was at a integrative meeting on ozone therapy last weekend, and the MD had a shirt on that said, "First do no farm." First do no harm, and that's the answer. So get back to that story so I can get to Brian Hooker. So when I met Brian Hooker, he put on the screen in a talk he was giving there at a meeting, and it was a page from William Thompson's notebook. And it had an email taped in to all the heads of the CDC. This is the so-called whistleblower, and he's really a criminal. He should have been jailed a long time ago, but he's been sitting since 2001 when he published this fraudulent paper. And what is the page of his notebook said in his own handwriting is, what are we going to do about the problem with the blacks? Because apparently if black boys were given the MMR vaccine, and in Hispanics, people of color, given the MMR vaccine before they were 3 years old. These are 3 RNA viruses. 3 RNA viruses. What it said was, if they were given that vaccine before they were 3 years old, they had 2 to 4 times more likelihood of developing autism, neurodegenerative diseases, cancer, dying. Okay, before 3 years old. And so and it was in his notebook, in his handwriting. And so when I was forced to go to Reno, the charge they fabricated as my husband drove all over Ventura trying to find out where I was. And on that Tuesday night, Harvey Whittemore called him up and he said, "You're never going to see her again unless you find those notebooks. They're in your house and you know it." And they planted them there. And an attorney found it out. One of the attorneys that worked for me, Mike Hugo, a real hero to the in the vaccine court, the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. He read the book. Kent sent it to him right after it came up, and he called me up and he said, "You have no idea what you stepped in, do you?" And I said, "No, why don't you enlighten me? I have plenty of time." And so he's a hero, but now he's also been silenced. He lost his license. And these stories are told in Plague of Corruption, so I can bounce back and forth a little bit. But what I really want you to see today is this Plague of Corruption and why Plandemic, the movie that was the conversations that were taped with Mickey Willis months in the fall, in the winter, before there even was a COVID. We taped hours and hours and hours. It just is amazing, because what it all turns back to is the fraud that was perpetrated on the world. So in my brain, what are we going to do about the problem with the blacks? The Notebook. And that's when I knew. I called Kent Heckenlively, and the book was already in press. And I said, "Oh, we have to write a new book. This is a plague of corruption. This is a plague of corruption, because if you can't wait till they're 3 years old, they give that vaccine on the schedule sometime around 18 months old, less than 2 years. If you can't wait until blacks and Hispanics, till the people who are at risk, for God only knows the reasons, but we did. We've been doing biomarkers, the parts of the immune system that degrade RNA. And that's why our discovery found a new family of retroviruses, RNA viruses, in humans, because certain men couldn't break it down like a Pac-Man. I'm doing the Pac-Man, gobble it up. It never gets to infect more cells. You gobble them up. But they had the RNA in there and the DNA in their genome. And so the retroviruses integrate in your genome and are only replicated when your cells replicate. And so you don't do certain things to them, and you can protect them. And we have the AIDS drugs, and we knew how to use them, which is really critical in COVID-19. And I just got a text on the way here that I'll try to tell as part of the story. But that's when you know it's pure evil. Do Black Lives Matter? Our athletes are treated like pin cushions. I can't even stand to watch NCAA or baseball, and half the people, because of my books, know I'm a big baseball fan. And I can't stand to even watch baseball because they're exploiting those innocent people who have worked all their life to get out of their poverty situations on athletic scholarships, and mostly people of color. And those are the people you're forcing. And when one black man kneels down on a football field because of injustice to a player, a quarterback, Kaepernick for San Francisco, he can't get a job anywhere, and he won a Super Bowl. Oh, okay. You start to realize where these stories and what you look at. So what I want you to go away with tonight, and I know you're all critical thinkers because you're sitting in this room, and that's the way Kent wrote the book. So I just called him up and said, "Oh, this had nothing to do with science. It's pure evil. It's a plague of corruption." So we started writing that literally the the fall of 2014. And then our second book, the paperback version of Plague came out, where I wrote new front material in it. And by that time, I knew it was all Tony Fauci. He's paying the grants. And I want to make one thing. Yeah. I like alliterations, so Felonious fucking Fauci is a good one. I like. But at any rate, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. Not one day in my life did I ever work for that man. I would never work with somebody with no integrity. I would have quit that job like I quit the jobs in Big Pharma, or was fired from jobs, and I threw notebooks at people like Frisbees. So here is this here's this sweet woman in prison, and she said, you know what she's in here for? Because you don't say and you don't know anything about it. And all I knew was I was arrested on a fugitive from justice charge. Felony fugitive from justice. And so she said she stole her own brain. And I said, at least it's not a misdemeanor. But when we went back to the jail before they released us after seeing the judge, every one of the police officers, can you help my mom? They got cancer? Can you help? Can you help any of this? And I'm offering help, and I'm saying, here's my card, and I wrote it down. And the bail bondsman, literally, he just did it on a signature. He did the whole thing on a signature because he knew, this was just total bullshit. And people don't realize who's in the prison systems in total bullshit. Think about all of the people who were put in jail for getting HIV. And again, it's the military, it's the blacks, who were put in jail for having sex with someone and risking them and not telling they have HIV. What was the end of pandemic, and the thing for me that meant so much, and I cry even to think of it at that time? It was silence equals death. And that's where we are right now. Take off the mask, don't let them muzzle you. And fear and anger are the most powerfully immune suppressive things there are. We're in church. We fear nothing but God. We fear nothing. We do not bow down to Big Pharma other than to let them kiss our bad asses. I actually got the Badass Award from the Doctors Who Rock, Kelly Gallagher, if she's here, another hero of mine. And I didn't know I was getting that award, just like I didn't know I was coming to a birthday party night there. So I'm looking at the menu on the table where the announcements are there, and it says the Badass Award, and I look, oh my God. So I get up there and I'm all puffed up with arrogance before that, and then I saw what it was, and I basically just said, sorry, Mom. And so what was the story I told, and it's the book of Daniel. There's a book called Thriving in Babylon, and it's written by one of our pastors, Larry Osborne at a church in Carlsbad. And Larry wrote this book, and it's Thriving in Babylon. And it's how to live biblically and thrive in Babylon. And so one of the chapters was on Daniel when Nebuchadnezzar, they took him, they castrated him. He was there his entire life, and he served the king because he was good at reading dreams and things like that. You can read that part of the book, is fabulous. But there's a chapter in there all about biblical humility and language and things like that. And so he said, yes, my Lord. And he's not talking to Nebuchadnezzar. He's talking to cool it, control your temper, control your things. So I used to sit on the plane in one of the planes when I was hassled and was threatened with arrest back last September 20th on a United Airlines flight, where some flight attendant said I didn't know how to wear my mask, and the pilot came over the loudspeaker and said, okay, we were on our way from Chicago to LA, and the pilot came on about an hour and a half out and said apparently some person on this plane can't figure out how to wear a mask. And we're going to have to hold up the whole plane, except for first class. It was where you enter in row 8 on the plane, and first class is row 1 through 7, and they go off, and the first row of seats, A, B, and C, right in that big door in this big plane, are empty, because the virus knows that first class people don't catch viruses. Just like a virus doesn't know if you're a gay, a black man, and an IV drug user, or a little black boy. The COVID-19 virus does not know the difference. And if in fact more than, and it's SARS-CoV-2, so we have to learn to speak our language right. They told us SARS-CoV-2 equals COVID-19 is the causative agent. No, it's not. Not one shred of data. You didn't isolate it, show it infectious, transmissible from a human to a human or a human cell line. And that would have been those aborted fetal tissue cell lines where they're actually growing those vaccines right now. And expressing another human's syncytin gene. That's an ancient gamma retrovirus envelope. It's Velcro. It sticks the fetus to the uterine wall, the embryo. So, and then the minute your cycle turns off, and we're going to get to shedding and things, and if I don't say it, we'll get it in question and answers. But so of course you hear stories of women's menstrual cycles that are changing now. Well, you put another syncytin gene, which is a natural part of our virome, our endogenous virome, which is 8% of your genome, are these silenced retroviruses and other viruses, pieces and parts. And now they just call them jumping genes. So they literally turned science all the way back 40 years ago. Frank Rossetti and Bernie Poise reported the first isolation, for the first time, the isolation of a human disease-causing retrovirus. Just the human retrovirus, because they didn't associate it with a disease for 30 years, or for 3 years later. And they've studied it for 40 years, and they still don't know the animal it came from or how it got into humans. But we could stop the disease if we stopped breastfeeding, if you didn't use blood supply, and if they didn't get shots. Well, in 1980, we didn't have PCR. So our labs weren't contaminated. We didn't have the molecular biology techniques. In fact, my undergraduate degree is in chemistry with a specialization in biology, because we didn't even have a biochemistry degree at the University of Virginia in 1980. We learn and technology, and we advance, and we learn a problem. So we've developed cell lines first starting about 1965 or 70. So these are immortalized cell lines that grow in the lab all the time. And in order for a cell line, like a cancer, in order for a cell line to continuously grow, it has to have defects in the immune system, because it's our immune system that stops us from getting cancer. And AIDS is an acquired immune deficiency. The last job I had was leading the lab of antiviral drug mechanisms at the National Cancer Institute there in Frederick, Maryland. 22 years. The corruption got me, and I got married, and I moved to California, to Santa Barbara, and Frank Rossetti was really upset with me because, I found God and David, and he said, you fell in love with California before you fell in love with David. And I said, it doesn't matter, does it? Because I'm out of here. And so the corruption at every level, but the little scientists don't see it. The people who are doing the job, because the people who control the journals and the message are lying to you with no data. So when we published that paper, October 8, 2009, it was released with great fanfare, and I would have just loved, this is still one of the best days of my life. I would have done anything, even though it ended up destroying my life. I'd do anything to be a fly on the wall and realize, when they got caught, oh my God, we were getting calls from myalgic encephalomyelitis from UK and everything like that. They did everything they could for almost 6 months to stop that paper from being published. But the data, just like in William Thompson, the signal wouldn't go away. This was a new family of mouse and monkey. All animals have gamma retroviruses. We do. I just told you we have them in our genome. And the envelope alone causes disease. What is this vaccine? It's not a vaccine. It doesn't meet the legal definition. Doesn't prevent transmission, and it doesn't of any infectious agent, much less SARS-CoV-2, which is not transmitting through people. When they take that lung lavage, when they take those confirmed positive PCR tests, and they culture them in the papers. They culture them in Vero cells. Well, they left out the monkey kidney. So people think they've been isolating something from people and showing it to pass this way. This is and always have been every flu season polio. What do we grow our polio, the polio virus in? That's it, Vero cells. Vero cells. We've been using this in the lab. I used this in a biosafety level 4 in Fort Detrick, the cells that went directly to Wuhan in 1990s. Oh, so what did Tony Fauci release on the Liberians? Sierra Leone. An Ebola virus that was contagious. So we identified a contagious cancer. And in that invitation-only meeting, July 22nd, 2009, after I gave my talk and showed the cancer, the kids, the women, the association of everything, because we threw it all out there, because remember Ryan White and Arthur Ashe. Ryan White was the child, Arthur Ashe was the black man, the tennis player, superstar, getting a heart transplant. Getting contaminating blood and dying of AIDS. Ryan White was hemophiliac, getting a lot of transfusions, getting AIDS. So when we published, and they covered it up, and they covered it up, and at the height of HIV/AIDS, on November 14th, 1991, when I defended my PhD thesis. HIV was at the height in this country, worldwide epidemic, which was literally previously, before today, the biggest scam, the biggest pandemic, the biggest mass murder committed by Gallo, Fauci, Hazelton, Burroughs Wellcome, which is now morphed into big pharma like Gilead with remdesivir. That was criminal fraud in the remdesivir paper, criminal fraud in the hydroxychloroquine paper. Tony Fauci knew all of this, and he knew it. He called hydroxychloroquine a vaccine in 2015 in a paper.
Dr. Judy Makovich from the documentary Pandemic.
And paying for them. And everybody says, oh, Judy, you can buy Vero monkey kidney cells anywhere. I said, yes, I know you could, but you wouldn't have the bat tissues in there and you wouldn't have the Ebola. So if we don't wake up, you get the strain du jour every day. Paper published October of 2011. I'm fired September 29th of 2011. I was fired because my student Max caught the Whittemores misappropriating federal funds. And so once again, she told me to give the cell line to Dr. Lombardi, who's also a criminal and should be criminally prosecuted, to the cell line that we were using for these experiments that told a lot of stories that's important for COVID-19. We can fix it with type 1 interferon. That's a vaccine. You can literally spray a nasal spray every day, and even if you were to catch this virus, and I'm saying this all because we're going to end the game. We're going to end the hate game. We don't care who got vaccinated. We're not saying we're vaccinated. The CDC now says, oh, the vaccine prevents transmission, even though 3 weeks or 2 months ago, they said it didn't, and we know there's not a single piece of data. Just one day, magically, it appears, like in all of these things we're saying. And so they say, okay, now you can take off the masks. And so you definitely don't want to wear the mask. They're concentrating the virus. They're crippling your immune system. I'm telling you all these stories. I isolated HIV. I isolated Ebola. I worked in Vero monkey kidney cells. I did a lot of experiments, and we've got publications that I did for that. So one of the things about on September 29th, when I was fired, I did tell her, fuck you. I did not learn early enough, and I don't think Larry wrote his book, Thriving in Babylon. She said, give it to him now, or you're fired. And I said, fuck you. And I just have not learned, and since my mother's passed away now, she got killed by the Prevnar shot and the flu shot that they gave her, conned her into taking in 2012, and she said, you have enough trouble, Judy, and she didn't ask. And it killed her in a slow, painful way over the next 6 years with AFib. AFib, your heart doesn't one day forget how to beat. You know, that's a vaccine injury. You give Prevnar and flu shots on the same day. We see so many people who fall out of their bed dead, or develop AFib. And then they give them that drug Eliquis. And they don't test it all, and it says right there on the commercial Eliquis, you're going to get a blood clot because you're at risk because you have AFib of getting a stroke. And my mom was terrified of strokes. So she tells her doctor her hemorrhoids start bleeding, nothing, it's just a hemorrhoid. He tells her go take Preparation H and never once measures her hemoglobin. And she's getting heavier and heavier and she can't breathe. She has so much fluid in her lungs, that's congestive heart failure, folks. They killed her. Iatrogenic, that's medical causes, whether drugs, doctors, or malpractice. The third leading cause of death in this country every year. Until this, at 830,000 people. And now this shot, now this injection. What are you injecting? The spike protein. What causes the disease? The spike protein. Are you going to worry about, who tested positive for expressing even the fraud? We now know that what was confirmed in that PCR test was influenza A, influenza B. What did they tell you to do last year? Run out in the summer and get the flu shot and wear the mask. Used to be the nurses that wore the mask, we knew they were the smart ones, so we had the hashtag ads for the mask. Because those were the smart ones. Now they've got 3 of them on, and it's horrific because they don't know, and they're killing themselves. Hopefully before they kill you. I'm glad to get removed from these planes because and God's in it all the way. Again, we're in church, so you've done nothing wrong. We're allowed to be in church, and God's in this all the way. But the mask compromises your own immune system. So I'm isolating, I'm working in these labs. All you need is a little UV light. The thing doesn't live on the metal. The thing doesn't live on the, it's like, I love the fellow who gave me the Dr. Seuss rhyme. I will not wear it on my face. I will not wear it any place. I will not wear it on my chin. I will not wear it to get in. I will not wear it out of fear. I will not wear it on my ear. I will not wear your dangerous mask. I will not wear it. And I usually say, please don't ask, but it should be kiss my ass. But it's dangerous. And it clearly drove the disease. It clearly drove the disease. There are worms in it. There are moving objects in it. A little bit of like those metallic things. There are fibers in it. Canada banned that surgical mask. So it started out with wearing a face covering. And then it became, you have to cover your nose and mouth. Because when I was on that plane September 20th, I didn't think about it, but I had a pink Women for Trump hat. I had a red jacket, a white shirt. I did take the button that said I will not comply off and dropped it in my briefcase.
That's crazy.
But they targeted me. And to have that pilot go over the loudspeaker and say, somebody put you at risk, and now we're going to have to test you all with our fraudulent test that is just going to, and now we're going to have to hold you there. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get killed. So I was listening to Plague of Corruption on Audible. It was fabulously done, and I wanted to tell the woman who read it, congratulations. So I had to listen to it first, and she speaks French a lot better than I do. I can't say Francois Barre Sinusi to save my life, and Montagnier was tough. At any rate, this is the corruption that's been going on for years. So I quickly turned my book on to the audio version of Thriving in Babylon to calm myself down and try to think, okay, God, help me. And I just started kind of praying Daniel's way. I wasn't mean to her, but I had a big bottle of water that said health freedom and things like that, and it wasn't see-through. And it had glutathione in it. It really stunk because I will get sick. They gave me, oh my God, you mean all those sequences we saw in the 70s were real? Contagious cancer. We can't afford to retrofit our labs. No, don't protect the lab workers. Why are they giving it to the doctors and nurses first? That's how it spreads around to their families. To their families, they've got it. And I've had families in these cohorts over the years where somebody drank out of a glass at a wedding party and shared the glass, and everybody at the table got some of the disease. Got some level. Some were asymptomatic for years, which is keep your immune system healthy, and you'll be fine. But absolutely don't wear a mask. Don't worry about the folks that were not discerning enough and who, or couldn't. That's why I hate the mandates. In our schools in LA, they're forcing this on our children. They're forcing it on the poorest of our society. Watch the movie on children's health defense called Medical Racism. They send hot lots. Don't believe they didn't. So now all of a sudden, Pfizer is going to have enough enough data to apply for FDA approval in 2 months. So that's right in time for school season, where colleges and things are mandated again to kids under stress, to kids who are going. You should never give a shot to anybody, number one, and this is how I'm giving you solutions. Never, ever, ever get another shot. And if Tony Fauci or anybody in your government says one word, do the opposite. They want us all afraid of each other. God is love. We love each other. I'm not going to ask you your status. I'm not going to run from you. In fact, everybody, most people here know that I couldn't stand hugs, mainly because when I was a kid, my mom said, you have a mouth, use it. And I wrote that in the acknowledgement because that's why I said sorry, Mom, at that meeting, because I did tell the story about kissing my bad ass and swearing. But what we did at home stayed at home. And so if I swore, if I spoke badly out after I did anything, I was in a grocery store once, and I don't know what I said, but it's like, well, you say it at home. It was probably fuck. Anyway, and she went whack, and I was sitting against that wall. And I'm like, what did I say? And there was a man there picking out his cheese, and he's like, this was before child abuse. It's not child abuse. It's not child abuse to discipline your kids. That's what God disciplines us, and it's not always fun. And I guarantee you, the people that weren't discerning enough and took this shot are going to be disciplined, and their families are going to pay for generations. If the kids are going to be sterilized, because you can't express another animal's syncytin gene. It's critical for a pregnancy. We're already seeing the miscarriages. We're already seeing the abortions. We're already seeing the problem. People with ME/CFS have these horrible clotting, abnormal periods. They can't have kids. They can't, literally they're anemic from this. That the Eliquis bled my mom out, and this shot is going to bleed the vulnerable out. And who are going to be the first to die? Oh, the HIV infected. There's HIV in those envelopes, and all you need is the envelope for the immune system. That's what's in the spike protein. The spike protein, they changed the name. One of the doctors said, Judy, I wasn't aware retrovirus has spike proteins. Unlike coronaviruses don't either, they're all called envelope. They're transmembrane and proteins. It looks like a little mushroom. The envelope alone causes disease. So what is the envelope of SARS-CoV-2? The weaponized virus made in viral monkey kidney cells starting in the 90s in Fort Detrick, and where Tony Fauci in 2014 released a deadly contagious Ebola virus on the Liberians. Oh, the black people in Africa sitting on all the oil and diamonds. Okay, they're certainly not smart enough to deal with those resources. Oh, and when did he do it? When William Thompson was caught by Brian Hooker after more than 14 years of dogging FOIA after FOIA after FOIA. Now that's a hero. Like Kent Heckenlively with a screaming child in one end and me in the other ear screaming at Kent Heckenlively for hundreds of hours. With Brian Hooker, did not give up. His pets filed FOIAs. And I'm just saying, he's great. He's very funny, and he's a wonderful man, and he is a hero, and I hope you'll continue to honor him as well, because, and all of the heroes, Dale Bigtree, the victims, Polly Tony, these movies, Andy Wakefield, everything. The spike protein is the disease. These people were so fearful of the spike protein that they injected it in a synthetic lipid nanoparticle. Lipid nanoparticle goes in every cell of the body. Remember when the vaccine came out and they said, oh, we have to keep it in the freezer? Well, why? Because God knows your body temperature is 98.6, and that'll degrade these nanoparticles. The particles of viruses are very labile.
You're welcome.
It's hard to isolate those without breaking the envelope. And the minute you break the envelope and you let out the virus, RNA, your immune system takes care of it. So you people do not have to be afraid of them. If you get immunized naturally by being exposed to them, if they're not coughing, they're not likely spreading much virus. I never isolated virus, AIDS or anything else, HIV, even the XMRVs, and that's why they say even you couldn't detect it. Your body, God keeps it dormant, keeps it asleep. There are 22 CpGs, methylation sites, on the on and off switch for these retroviruses. All that 8% of the genome, heavily methylated. They bud out of your cells using your own fat, your own membranes in order to protect you. What are you going to do with a synthetic membrane? It's a nanoparticle. It goes every cell of the body. Virus is about 100 nanometers of retrovirus. They don't go in every cell of the body. That's why they need the ACE receptors and the HIV, GP120, whatever the receptors are, CD4, macrophage, CCR5. You don't need to know all that stuff, but we do. And this is why Tony Fauci censors me, because they don't want you to know. Do not be afraid of anybody. Everything you would do to prevent COVID, no mask, no isolation, cannabis, that's fun. You get some good sleep. Type 1 interferons, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin. We have dozens. Quercetin, curcumin. I can't even list all the solutions we have for the vaccine injured, as well as, and they will be, for those 100 million people who were either forced, coerced, shamed, or just plain confused, like the doctors and nurses in those hospitals. We've been told masks save lives. Masks saved lives in the Thomas fire. That's where you use an N95 mask. Masks don't save lives when you're wearing a contaminated diaper on your face. I even saw something as stupid as, oh, the mask will help you get fluid in your lungs. That's congestive heart failure, folks. I mean, there's nothing about this narrative that any doctor, anywhere, and that's why, Dr. Billy, we'll give him a big song for his birthday, and we'll shout out to him, but any doctor should know this. And I had a doctor that wrote me with an MD, PhD from New York somewhere, and I had written sometimes, part of that thriving in Babylon is don't text, just erase it. Write the angry grams and just erase it. But when you do those gummies, you kind of forget to erase it, and you hit the button. So this is not good. So there's a time and a place for everything. and so it's, so once or twice I hit that button and send it, and that was one of those nights a couple nights ago. When it's a listserv of microbes and mental illness, usually for chronic Lyme patients. I've got news for you. They're not tick-borne diseases. Because just like those cell lines are contaminated with retroviruses, those monkey cells, chicken eggs, dog cells, cow blood, you name it, pig blood, those are all, we treat them in the labs with antimycotics, with antibiotics, with antifungals. Why do you think antifungal drugs are working? Oh, because in order for your wonderfully, fearfully made immune system not to work, you have to be infected with a parasite, and they're in the masks. Just going to keep saying it. If you don't think so, I'll show you the electron micrographs I had on the plane on March 10th when they arrested me off that plane for wearing the wrong kind of mask. But again, God is good and it'll work out. And on September 20th, it was great because she came to what looked like a military guy sitting next to me in that exit row. And she said, "Sir, would you like to move? This person's putting you at risk." And he's sitting there watching something the whole time. I never looked at his face because I was afraid to. And he's sitting there the whole time. And he looks up and says, "Nah, I'm good." So, at the pink Trump hat. And so she said, "Now I'm going to reiterate, after first class gets up, nobody gets off." And you could see, because the plane door was in the aisle I was in, it was the exit row. And ABC were empty, remember the virus knows. And you could see the police out there. And I'm like, oh no. But he stood up in the back. He stood right up. And he pulled this huge suitcase down, and I'm like, oh God, I'm done. I'm done. I can't, if he puts that. And so he put that suitcase down. He took one step backwards, and I'm slow as molasses, but if I see a block like that, I'm running through that line. So I'm running all the way through LAX, and I called my husband, and Dr. Lori was driving him to pick me up, and she keeps me safe. It's her fault. She was supposed to be on that plane, but her dog got sick. At any rate, I said, "Be on the curb in 2 minutes, because they can take you off the airport as well." And so she was right there on the curb. I can hardly, my lungs are burning. I got the XMRV. I'm ready to develop the, I don't have the mask on for sure, but, I get in the car, and she's like, "So, did you film it?" And I'm like, I'm running for my life. But fortunately, on the plane on March 10th, I at least tried to film it and got an audio of the abuse by the police officer. And I told the Patriot Street Fighter Scott McKay, I gave him a video, and he came up with a picture of the guy and said, "Is this the guy?" And I said, "Yep." And it won't go well for him in Santa Barbara. So there are a lot of people that are going to make his life miserable, but it won't go well for him in the court of law either when I sue him for the abuse. So that will happen as well. So all of these things are intended to tell you, number one, there are solutions. That's why I said serious at the beginning, because Frank Rossetti taught me, never present a problem without a solution. I don't talk about causes. All of my book showed solutions. We have solutions. I'm a molecular biologist and a biochemist. It's at the molecular level that we understand the cells. That's why we understand. It's the hyperinflammation that is the disease. It's the acquired immune dysfunction. That's AIDS. HIV-associated AIDS, air pollution-associated AIDS, radiation, chemtrails AIDS. There are lots of causes and lots of pathogens. Those Borrelia and the Babesia, and Dr. Klinghardt taught me a few years ago, a retrovirus never travels without a parasites, because pathogens rarely travel alone. Our immune systems can take out those fragile little RNA viruses, and retroviruses are stronger than the little RNA virus, the common cold, COVID, the common cold. So the asymptomatic carriers, that's a lie. That's a lie. But it's not a lie, because 6% of America, at the end of our studies in 2012, the Fauci-funded fraud, hey, another alliteration, The Fauci-funded fraud that was the MBio paper of criminal Ian Lipkin, who was assigned by Francis Collins. And you see these people on TV every day. So that's why we name names and we don't take any prisoners. We just, and we're not going to, because everybody, it's for education. Yes, I appreciate the money, but you know what I'm going to do with it? I'm going to pre-order Ending Plague. And everyone in this, if you want to help me, everyone in this audience should pre-order today. Get a couple of copies, because that's how Plague of Corruption couldn't be censored. You can only do that from Amazon. Do it and stick it to them. Do it so that they have to ship that book when it comes out, which will be on or about August 2nd if we end the Plague of Corruption by then. So that book is called Ending Plague, A Scholar's Obligation in an Age of Corruption. We're in an age of corruption. Plague of Corruption, the subtitle, was Restoring Faith in the Promise of Science. And to do that, the scholar, and that can be every one of you in every walk of life. What is a scholar's obligation? Produce knowledge. You don't get a PhD unless you've done something that reverses dogma that nobody ever did before. My PhD was HIV latency silencing in monocytes by all the mechanisms we're talking about with COVID and all of the mechanisms that we know. You don't hear of HIV/AIDS, do you? Because they're not dead. What do they get? Pre-exposure prophylaxis. Well, pre-exposure prophylaxis is a vaccine. It's type 1 interferon, it's cannabis, it's ozone. All of these used with a practitioner. It's chlorine dioxide, it's hydroxychloroquine, it's ivermectin. So go to your chiropractor, go to your naturopathic doctor, go to your DOs. These are the people that know how to heal you with nutrition, how to heal you with good food. Don't eat garbage, don't go in Vons, don't buy processed food. Don't go to those places that won't let you in. If they won't let you in, go somewhere else. Spend your money. Get rid of your health insurance. It's sick insurance. Don't pay them. Don't pay your taxes. I think the day before yesterday was tax day. Don't file them. What are they going to do? They stole our country. They violated the Constitution. There's nothing. I'm not going to simply write you a check or file and say, oh, just kick me again. Just shoot me again. What are they doing with their tax money? They're killing your children. They're killing your parents. Take your parents out of those nursing homes. Then we'll send a message. But just like on that plane, in both planes, in the plane in Chicago, I need help. I need, we can't do this alone. There are, Dr. Billy standing here, our chiropractors, there are people we know in the constitutional courts. We need each and every one of you. Take off the mask. The CDC, take it off. You can take it off now. And if somebody says, are you vaccinated? I'm good. Yeah. And sometimes I wear the shirt that says I'm not vaccinated on the front, and in the back it says I'm immune. Develop your God-given immune system. You don't have to. This is the argument. Brian Hooker, all of those heroes, Suzanne Humphreys, the people, Andy Wakefield, 20 years they fought this kind of thing. Sherry Tenpenny, 20 years and thousands of papers. Once you see this, you can't unlearn it. You can't unlearn it, and that's why we write the books the way we are. That's why I tell this talk. I got science all day long, but we know Tony Fauci won't debate me. We've asked for it. We know they won't debate me. There's really no debate. We cured AIDS. We cured HIV. I never thought HIV AIDS. I was in the lab. I was working with those men. I'm looking at these people with ME/CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. They hurt so bad you can't put a blanket on them. It has to be over them. They have to be in a silent room. They have to be with no lights. The eye and the sound sensitivities, their brain, the energy it takes. They can't run their brain, their heart, and their muscles at the same time. These are mitochondrial diseases. They're diseases of energy. So those folks are going to have a lot of trouble detoxing that thing when their natural killer cells, their front line, their macrophages, their dendritic cells, their front line, 90% of your type 1 interferons made by a cell called a plasmacytoid dendritic cell. What does integrated XMR be to that? It won't do to that cell. It will not make type 1 interferon. What do we use to treat it? Oh, something called Ampligen that mimics an RNA virus. Poly-I, poly-C, a string of things. What did Candace Pert and her husband Mike Ruff and Frank Rossetti discover in the 1980s, 86, 87? Peptide T, a little peptide made by your own body to block the interaction of macrophages and T cells. Wasn't the T cell dying where Tony Fauci sent all his treatments? Wasn't the T cell dying where he collected his patents? 1 in 10,000 T cells were infected, and the idiots called it bystander effects. Oh yeah, that's right. The data clearly said there was another shooter, and it was a sniper that kept those cells, because that wasn't the infection. It was the hyperinflammation. It was the cytokine storm. We know exactly the disease signature, and we know how to fix it at every level. We've got dozens of drugs, and I'm just going to end to say, there's a man in Philadelphia, and I got a text from him when I got here today, and they called, and Lori said, "Who's that?" And I said, "Jim, it's Dr. Jim." And we looked at it, and I just said, "I can't talk, call me later." And they text me and said, "We want to get you on a conference call, because this man, that he's my age, he's 6 months older than me, he's younger than me. In December of 1958 is his birthday. And Dr. Tina, Dr. Jim, and I put him on the right of those AIDS drugs, put him on those drugs, low dose, added nutrition, added some bifunctional. He actually wrote ivermectin. He actually wrote and said, I'm better. And for the first time, he might have a life. He still lives with his parents, is a lawyer, an attorney who couldn't work. And we see this over and over again. In 2010, we knew this. And there was a Canadian scientist working with us who discovered a human beta retrovirus family associated with cirrhosis of the liver. Anybody with other infectious and other inflammatory disease is the victim. So who's going to die from that shot? And don't tell me it's not planned. It's the 25 to 50 million Americans that they infected by injection, by a contaminated blood supply and contaminated vaccines. But we're smart enough not to play their games. We're smart enough to continue to speak the truth in love. And we're smart enough to love each other and get out there and say, never again. A scholar's obligation in an age of corruption is to make sure at every level. I said it in the beginning. We filed a whistleblower lawsuit in 2014, literally as soon as I heard Brian Hooker and realized what it was. As you know, the last chapter of Plague of Corruption, when Dr. Lori read our book in the middle of summer of 2019, when she introduced me to Mickey Willis, she said, "Oh, you can't publish that book. It doesn't have a dead man's trigger." And I'm like, "What's that?" and she told me it's the man with the vest with the everything, and it'll blow up the world with the atom bomb if they kill you and your figure comes off the detonator, or the timer goes off, whatever. And I thought about it a second, and I called Kent Heckenlively, And the book was supposed to end with The Way Forward. The book was in press, being made. It takes months to get these books done after you've finished it. And I called Kent and I said, there's one more story I should tell you.
Yeah, I believe there's going to be
Frank
another
Rossetti.
genocide coming.
They left Frank Rossetti 2 years too long to figure it out. And they forced him into retirement. Ronald Reagan took the retirement age away from government employees. If Ronald Reagan had not done that, then Tony Fauci would have been gone in 2009 and we'd have never had COVID-19. So I don't want anybody to blame Republican or Democrat. Tony Fauci stood there next to Obama, and there's every evidence Obama knew exactly what he's doing when he killed 21,000 innocent Liberians with their little vaccine program sent over by Christian missionary doctors who thought they were doing the right thing. Bill Gates' program, another one of those. And this doctor got infected, and John is the name of the doctor, and this is another God thing. I know these people. They go to my church, or used to. And John kept Kent quiet, prayed for him, gave him solution. He's got Ebola. It's clear Ebola is contagious. It's clear from the molecular biology. It came straight from Fort Detrick, from those Vero cell lines that I developed and worked on with others in 1990s, mid-90s. They released it on Liberia to cover up William Thompson's confession. When Senator Posey of Florida had the 1,000 pages of documents ready to go to Congress and say, look at this. And then Tony Fauci in his white coat, you could tell he's never done a day of work, because my coats definitely aren't white. They're laced with blood and work, and they're dirty. And you can't get it out. And he's never done a day of work. He just picks that coat up and pretends it's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, beating up dogs and little girls, misogyny against women. I'm 15, 18 years younger than them. They thought I was just a stupid technician. They thought I was just a woman who could be bought, or who could be whatever else, bullied into submission and bowing down to them, but they just did not realize what they ran into when they ran into Judy Mikovits and Frank Rossetti. But they forced Frank into retirement. They gave him 2 years. He spent every minute re-isolating the viruses, proving us right. They told him to cremate the samples. Autoclave the samples, which is same as cremating the people with COVID. And this is another place where my big mouth got me in trouble, because in the summer of 2011, when they tried multiple times to get me to recant the data and bully me and threaten me and confuse you into saying there's no such, come on Judy, the viruses don't exist, come on Judy, they don't exist. And, oh come on Judy, they'd have died in HIV, they would have died with AIDS, and HIV-infected people would have it. I said no, HIV-infected people only had HIV. If they had HIV and XMRV and you took off the innate immune system and the HIV took out the adaptive immune systems, the T cell, those were the guys who died. Those were the people who died with HIV. And I said, exhume them, I'll wait. So they planned every bit of it, and that's why no autopsies, because you know what it's going to show? Never was SARS-CoV-2 in a human. That's a monkey virus. Because that cell membrane is a monkey cell membrane. It's not a human cell membrane. And you've got RNA, DNA, you've got HIV in it, you've got XMRVs in it, and I have the paper from Journal of Virology. Oh, it was published after I was jailed, and every single piece of paper, computer drive, flash drive, taken out of my office September 29th. And then Science, the journal, wrote an article on September 30th memorializing their crimes and said, she said she'll have her new sequences. We had full-length sequences of the virus, and I know exactly where they were in those 2 death stores. They fabricated a crime Watergate style. They never changed their methods. They're easy. They're stupid. But we're not stupid. And we're going to stand up, and they're not going to be able to target me. They're not going to be able to target people. And because nobody's going to wear a mask, and everybody's going to say, yeah, I'm immune, yeah, I'm good, you know, and we're not going to have these passports and these cards. And I understood that, I understood that the FBI said that they're going to fully prosecute anyone who fabricates one of these vaccine cards, which they have absolutely no control over, which they forced you to get in drive-by shootings at stadiums and parks. We in LA don't do drive-by shootings. It's not a really good idea. It's not good for you. But the bottom line is, I'll stand up in here and say, FBI, for 5 years, Frank Rossetti and I, as soon as he got to Frederick when he was forced into retirement in May of 2014, he dropped this recyclable container on my doorstep and said, I don't know how this shit got on my moving van. Frank Rossetti does what he tells you to do. They said they had him under armed guard. It was one of our friends, he just talked baseball. We coached the team, there's a picture of him in the middle of the book, but we don't tell you which one he is. At any rate, he's a Yankee fan, Frank's a Red Sox fan. They had a lot to talk about that day. So Frank, anything that had to do with me or XMRV went into the recyclable container. But the guard went home at 5 o'clock. Hey, he's not getting paid overtime. He's Frank's buddy. He's like, see you, Frank, see you tomorrow. And at the end of the day, all of that stuff went home with Frank. They didn't tell him where to put the recyclable container. We're smarter than them. And so I scanned every bit of it into hard drives, made an appointment with my lawyer, for $10,000. He invited the FBI. We taped every word of it, showed him the notebook, showed him the copy, said, whose possession is this? He looks all the way through it and says, I don't know, whoever's handwriting it is. It was mine. And then all the data that would have led to the arrest of these criminals. And they left that under seal from May of 2014 when we handed every piece of evidence. Frank did not autoclave the samples. He shipped them to a couple of places, and we paid for them $500 a month when I was making nothing for these years to take care of it. Now, don't worry, I moved them before we wrote the book. I don't care if they find them, because they're not going to win this game, because we all know anyway, we don't need the samples, but we can prove it. We can prove everything we said. We have proved everything they said, and that's why they keep coming after us to censor us and silence us, because they don't want you to know. And they do not want you to know. And every single person can end this thing so that we never have this in our country again. And I appreciate you being here. I very much, Billy, appreciate the money. Thank you.
There was one guy with a mask, that was hilarious. So I might end this sooner, because I have a question to ask her about the injections and how they are magnetic. So I might end this video so I can show her the clips that I have. Thank you for
this is
being
where the
here,
show
guys.
gets really
Appreciate
ugly
you
for
guys.
everyone. Is everybody cool? Let's give it up one more time for Judy. And we raised $14,000, which is awesome. But if you guys want to give some more money, we're more than happy to give it to you, because the thing is, we need money for this fight. Big Pharma's got a huge fund, but we got the heart, we got God on our side. So if you can afford to give some more money to Judy, that would be amazing. All right, is that cool? Let's give it up for
I'm going to be uploading
here
another video tonight about the jabs and what's happening to people.
You guys, who was at the first one? There's only a few people, so some of the stuff I'll go over is a little bit redundant from the first one. There's not much. I was up till 1:30 last night.